here on the scene in Columbia about 30 minutes ago and saw this incredible damage from this very unusual and obviously very powerful tornado that hit the Columbia area yesterday afternoon. As we arrived on scene, we came to the intersection of Highway 13 and Highway 98, and this is where the tornado appears to have made first contact with the ground. It appears to have run on the ground for about 3 to 4 miles, running almost parallel with Highway 98 along this very congested corridor, with dozens of businesses and dozens of homes damaged along this area. As you can see from the video here, obviously a very, very powerful tornado, and it has thrown cars, roofs, everything in its path that has been destroyed here along this corridor just south of downtown Columbia along Highway 98. We're following this now to the northeast along the same track that the tornado took through this area, as you can see coming through this commercial and retail area just south of the Walmart and other businesses along here. We've noticed a tremendous amount of damage as it ripped the roofs off of buildings, homes, tossed cars into the air, ripped trees from the ground, and a very, very powerful storm here that traveled to the northeast through Columbia, and very unusual storm for December and very, very powerful.
Meanwhile, in Alabama, a 3-year-old boy's dramatic escape from a fire was captured on video. Take a look at this.
Come on, your mama right here. Your mama said do it. Oh, he got it.
So while a boy jumped from a second-story window into his cousin's arms to escape the flames, he is in fair condition at the hospital this morning. This fire happened on Christmas Day. Firefighters also rescued a second child inside that burning home.
Hello everyone, I'm Aisha Sase. We have this breaking news. An Air Asia flight en route from the Indonesian city of Surabaya to Singapore is missing. An Indonesian transport official tells CNN flight 8501 lost contact with air traffic controllers early Sunday morning. The pilot reportedly requested an unusual route before the plane lost contact. The airline says a crisis center has been set up and search and rescue operations are underway. Now, there are reports as many as 162 people we're hearing are on board the Airbus 320. The aircraft is like the one you see here on your screens. Indonesian TV reports most are Indonesian, with 3 Koreans, 1 passenger from Singapore, 1 from the UK, and 1 from Malaysia also on board. Now, AirAsia Indonesia issued a statement which reads, "At the present time, we unfortunately have no further information regarding the status of the passengers and crew members on board, but we will keep all parties informed as more information becomes available."
We bring in ABC News aviation consultant Colonel Stephen Ganyard in Washington this morning. And Steve, we've heard a lot about what they've found so far, notably a shadow in the depths of that ocean that looks as if the plane is largely intact. What does that tell you about what may have happened at 32,000 feet?
Well, it's intriguing, Amy. Think of this now as a crime scene investigation. Every little piece of debris, where it is, the condition it's in, is going to tell the investigators, or at least give them clues to actually what happened. As David was talking about, the debris field and what it looks like is going to be very important. If there is, in fact, a shadow that looks like an airplane under the water, it would suggest that the airplane came down fairly slowly. Maybe it was in a stall, mushing to the ground at maybe 100, 150 miles an hour. It did not hit at a very high rate of speed, which would have dispersed lots of debris all over, and we wouldn't see that shadow. So they'll look at the big pieces. What will they see? Is there a fuselage there? Are both wings attached? If both wings are attached, it tells you something different if just one wing is there. So there are lots of things, lots of clues that we're going to have here, and ultimately we need to get to those black boxes, which will reveal all the details we need.
And Steve, if indeed it was a stall and a slow descent, would there have been a possibility of survivors as it hit the ocean like we saw in the Miracle on the Hudson?
No, it's not that slow. It's not a controlled ditching where the pilot would have had time to slowly fly the airplane into the ocean. This would have been a violent, unsurvivable event.
And up until this year, we're always told that the most dangerous time of being in a plane is at takeoff and at landing, and that when you're in midair, that's typically the safest time. But these incidents this year have certainly given all of us major pause about that advice.
You're exactly right. And we don't have answers now, but we will have those answers very soon. Remember, Amy, the key here is in a safety investigation, find out what went wrong and make sure that it never happens again.
Brutally challenging rescue effort continues tonight off the coast of Greece. A ferry is stranded after a fire on board. More than 300 were trapped. Carter Evans has the latest.
As smoke poured from the burning ship, desperate passengers made frantic phone calls for help. It's chaos, said one passenger. No one is taking us off. Bring someone for help. 60-mile-per-hour winds and pounding waves have slowed rescue efforts. Greek military helicopters began plucking passengers a few at a time from the ship's bridge just after nightfall. More than 14 hours after the fire began, 300 passengers remain huddled on deck in nearly freezing temperatures, waiting to be rescued. Italian media report some children appear to be suffering from hypothermia. The fire is now partly under control. The ferry was headed across the Adriatic Sea from Greece to Italy. It's unclear how the fire started, but some who escaped say the intense heat below deck melted their shoes as they scrambled for safety. The Greek Coast Guard says it will be a very difficult night trying to rescue the remaining passengers. They'll be battling rain, strong winds, and growing despair.
This morning, we're learning of another AirAsia plane in trouble. This time, however, it is in the Philippines. A flight from Manila overshot the runway today in Calibo International Airport. A witness says it made a hard landing and passengers had to use evacuation slides. There is no official word of any injuries, but you can imagine how scary that must have been.
Dozens have been killed in heavy rains and flash floods across parts of the Philippines, Malaysia and southern Thailand. Officials say Tropical Storm Jiangmi has left at least 31 dead in the Philippines. 7 people are reportedly missing. Winds of up to 65 kilometers per hour have ravaged the region. Officials in the Philippines say areas affected by the heavy rains include those still recovering from last year's Typhoon Haiyan. Flooding has wiped out roads and bridges and forced thousands to flee to evacuation centres. Malaysia is suffering its worst flooding in a decade, forcing almost 250,000 people from their homes, officials report. More than 20 people in the northeast have died. In neighbouring southern Thailand, the death toll is believed to be at least 15.
In Shanghai, China, a New Year's Eve celebration went horribly wrong. 36 people were killed in a deadly stampede. Shock and horror in Shanghai after a deadly stampede breaks out at a New Year's celebration on the city's famous riverfront, the Bund. Chinese state media report at least 36 people are dead and more than 40 injured. According to state media, many of the dead were students. Posts on social media show huge crowds packing pedestrian areas along the Huangpu River and emergency workers working on site. Witnesses described scenes of utter chaos. In a hospital waiting room, scenes of grief and mourning with desperate relatives sobbing and wailing for their loved ones. Now, I just want to know what is going on inside the hospital, this woman says. Many relatives had requested to go inside and asked the hospital to give us a list of the injured, including the conscious and unconscious ones who are being treated in there, but nobody got back to us. A witness told China's Xinhua news agency that people were scrambling for dollar-shaped coupons, fake bills that resemble U.S. $100 notes, which were thrown from the third floor of a nearby building. Chinese authorities are investigating the cause of the stampede, a human disaster that took place after 11:35 p.m. on New Year's Eve, a shocking and utterly tragic end to 2014 in China. Now, people return to the Bund today to lay flowers and pay their respects. Again, 36 people dead in Shanghai at a New Year's celebration that turned into tragedy.
Can you come past me and get my disc? That's where I am. There's all the other media are here as well.
I thought I'd come and get a high spot.
Well, we are getting the first close-up view this morning of the Greek ferry that caught fire last weekend. It's now arriving at the Italian port of Brindisi. Authorities suspect there may be more bodies on board that haven't been found yet. More than 400 people were rescued from the burning ship. At least 11 died. 2 Albanian sailors, were also killed trying to salvage the vessel.
Israel's Prime Minister trying to head off a Palestinian bid to join the International Criminal Court, a move that could expose Israel to war crimes complaints. Benjamin Netanyahu chaired a meeting at the Israeli Defense Ministry today to discuss a response to the move. Palestinians are looking at other avenues for ending the Israeli occupation after failed peace talks and a failed attempt to get the UN Security Council to intervene. Mr. Netanyahu says Palestinians don't have the legal right to join the ICC.
We expect the International Criminal Court to summarily dismiss the Palestinian Authority's duplicitous application because the Palestinian Authority is not a state. It is an entity that is allied with the terror organization Hamas, which commits war crimes, and the State of Israel is a law-abiding state with a moral army that keeps all international laws. We will defend Israeli soldiers in the same way that they protect us.
Our next guest is optimistic that 2015 could bring some positive developments in the region as a whole. Aaron David Miller joins us now. He advised 6 U.S. Secretaries of State on the Middle East peace process, now Vice President of New Initiatives at the Woodrow Wilson International Center. Always good to see you. Aaron, I want to cover a few things, but this signing of the Rome Statute, the move towards the ICC, give us your thoughts on the timing and what it would mean. Calculated risk or strategic move?
You know, Woody Allen said that 90% of success in life is just showing up. He's actually wrong. 90% of success in life is showing up at the right time. And I suspect that not only on the substance is this going to be complicated, this move by the Palestinians, but also on timing. Look, you have 80 days before an election, which may or may not be decisive. But I think as frustrated and as desperate as the Palestinians may be, there really was no, I think, compelling case to basically create a campaign ad for the re-election of the current Israeli prime minister. If that's their objective and their goal, I think they have furthered that that campaign in going down this road to the ICC. So I know they've been told to wait. There's an enormous amount of impatience. Mahmoud Abbas is a good man. He doesn't want to go back to the armed struggle. He'd argue that negotiations right now are probably pointless. I think that's true. But frustration and desperation isn't alleviated or made better, frankly, by a move that will, I think, do quite a lot to weaken the Palestinian case.
It is, you know, you've got Israel objecting. The U.S., as you say, it says it'll be counterproductive, but counterproductive to what? There is no peace process.
Well, that's true. And that, I think, we wouldn't be having this conversation if the factors that were required to create a serious negotiating process and to actually get to a two-state solution were present. Those factors are leaders who are on both sides, who are capable of making the kinds of decisions required on Jerusalem, border, security, refugees. It means an administration in Washington that has both the will and the skill and looks at Israeli-Palestinian peace as a priority. And frankly, it also involves a region that isn't in the process of complete meltdown, which has made these sorts of decisions extremely uncertain and risky. And
it requires, of course, partners who actually do want a peace process themselves. You mentioned the Israeli elections. The right and extreme right, for that matter, are making a lot of noise these days in Israel. Does that concern you? Are the more extreme voices representative these days?
You know, Israel has moved to the right, but in the case of on the narrow issue of this particular election, that in some respects means that the right has moved away from the current Israeli prime minister, who's lost a lot of credibility and a lot of points in the polls. If becoming prime minister was just a question of who's the fairest in the land, I suspect Benjamin Netanyahu would win by default. But it means putting together a viable coalition, and that still right now, I suspect, might favor the right. But who knows? I'm predicting, frankly, because I'm tired of my own annoyingly negative analysis on all of these issues. We've talked about this so many times, Michael.
We have.
At least decision points in 2015 on Iran and in Israel, and perhaps even in Washington as the president watches the sands pass through his presidential hourglass, that maybe, in fact, 2015 will, in fact, produce some openings that could lead to less annoyingly negative results.
Yeah, your article on CNN.com was refreshingly pushing a little optimism, Aaron, which was nice to see, saying basically things aren't as bad as you might think they are. You mentioned Iran. Let's talk about that briefly. Fearful talk from Israel, some in the US Congress, of course. Do you see a path to, if not normalization with Iran, some sort of transition as the talks go on?
Well, I think it's a transaction, not a transformation. I mean, dealing with Cuba, watch in a Republican-controlled Washington, at least on the legislative side, is going to be complicated enough. I think if, in fact, there is an agreement on the nuclear issue, it's a business deal. It's going to be accompanied by profound distrust on both sides, and by regional objectives between the U.S. and Iran that are actually quite in conflict on matters like Hezbollah. And Syria. So, no, if it happens, I think it'll be gradual, incremental. But the question is, will you even get a nuclear deal? I'm suggesting that the alternatives will, in fact, serve to focus the mind, perhaps in Tehran, and maybe, in fact, you can get an agreement.
Better than the alternatives. I don't want to let you go without talking Iraq, which is always on my radar. Can you foresee ISIS, notwithstanding a cohesive, functioning, quote-unquote, nation of Iraq, ever emerging from the sectarian mess that exists now and likely won't go away?
I think that Iraq, it's going to be very hard to put the Iraqi Humpty Dumpty back together again, or take it to a place where, frankly, in its modern history, it hasn't ever been, which is a coherent, cohesive state with a fair power sharing on economics and politics among Sunnis, Kurds, and Shia. No, I don't think that's where we're going. Maybe, in fact, you can stabilize it, begin to create some measure of equity and fairness among the confessional groups, and brunt, I'm hoping, ISIS's efforts to expand into Iraq. But no, Michael, this is a generational problem. It's a long movie. Next president of the United States is going to be dealing with this one too.
Yeah, maybe the one after as well. Aaron David Miller, always a pleasure to have you on the program. A couple of great articles on CNN.com and also foreignpolicy.com. Urge people to check those out. Thank you very much again.
Thanks, Michael. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Aaron.